All right. Good morning, everybody. Ryan from the Headwaters Science Center, and I am sitting in the dark today because today's show is going to be one that's going to be dealing with a little bit about sort of mixing colors and mixing light and how we go about that. And so these shows that you're seeing streamed sometimes, not always streamed, but occasionally streamed on Saturday mornings are shows that are happening because we have a grant with the Boys and Girls Club that is, they're doing after school clubs here. And we've been doing sort of themed weeks with the Boys and Girls Club, themed months, I guess, more so. And so the theme of October for our after school clubs that we're doing with our Boys and Girls Club groups has been sound and light. And so the shows that we're doing on the weekends are in exchange, or kind of going in tandem with those. I'm supposed to be doing a sound or a light-based show every Saturday for the month of October. And like I said, some of them got streamed, some of them haven't. But if you're interested, we do these shows live here at the Headwaters Science Center. I'm right up by the bathrooms right now. I don't have any guests with me right this second, but it's entirely possible that somebody might roam in here and want to participate. So just a heads up on that for the live stream audience out there is we are open. So if you hear some noise coming in off the exhibit floor or some kid wanders into frame, it's because we're an active and open science center and we do have a few guests out on the floor. But, as I said, what we've been talking about with the Boys and Girls Club after school club kids for the last few weeks at this point is different sort of sound and light projects. And what I wanted to talk about today is we got a new exhibit here at the Headwaters Science Center maybe a month ago or so now. So the space up by the bathrooms now, so this is up on the second floor if you come and visit. You'll notice looks pretty different than how it did, back in September, August. And basically we painted everything black except for one wall, and we have now a bunch of exhibits up here that are all dealing with light, or at least use light. And this ring here that I'm sitting next to is one of them, and I've used this in previous demos before to sort of highlight some color stuff, but particularly relevant for what we're talking about here. And so mixing colors is something that a lot of people obviously experience. Like, it's something we learned pretty early on in school is like, this color plus this color equals this color. But the way we learn it tends to be sort of through a specific lens. It's through a lens that we call subtractive color mixing, which is different than the way that like a lot of things operate. So if you come and you visit this exhibit up here, you'll see that like this particular light ring, for example, I can mix colors, but the colors I have to mix are not the colors you probably learned in school about like how to make different colors. You probably learned red, yellow, blue, or if your teacher was feeling particularly like they wanted to be actually correct about something, magenta, yellow, and cyan. But that's something that's really only applicable in certain contexts, and frankly, it's not the context that most color mixing happens around us. So that's the way that you would make the color that's in, for example, like your shirt would be through subtractive color mixing, or painting or markers. And so we tend to use it in the context of like you're mixing paint or markers usually is the first thing you're kind of learning with. But like I said, it's not necessarily the truest, or at least most common way that we experience color, because light doesn't really mix that way. And obviously we're surrounded by light all the time, and the light that we're surrounded by, a lot of times people know that like, yeah, the light we're surrounded by is white light, and white light is a mix of like all the different colors of light kind of put together. So this that I have right next to me, for example, is a white light. So I have my red knob, my green knob, and my blue knob turned all the way up to max, and I'm getting white out of it. But it seems like a lot of people never make that extra step and be like, well, if I mix all the lights together, I get white, but how come when I mix all my paint together, I don't get white? I get black or brown or whatever, depending on what colors we're mixing. Like I said, it's because it sort of works in sort of an opposite way. Light works with what we would call additive color mixing, whereas paints and dyes and things like that work with what we call subtractive color mixing. And so, let's experiment with that a little bit. So like I said, we have here a ring that I can adjust the amount of red, green, and blue light that is coming out of it. And so, for example, like I said, I have all of them turned up right now, so we're getting white light. But if I wanted to just have pure red light, I could do that. So I could turn my green all the way down, I can turn my blue all the way down, and I can just show pure red light. Similarly, I could do pure green, I could do pure blue. Or if I wanted to mix some colors, what I could do is if I wanted to make, say, cyan, I could leave my red knob all the way down, turn my blue all the way up, turn my green all the way up. And there we go, that's cyan. If I wanted to do magenta, I would turn the green all the way back down and turn the red all the way up. So all red, all blue, no green makes magenta. And then if I wanted to have yellow, I would turn the blue all the way down, turn the green and the red all the way up, and there's my yellow. And so you'll note that those three colors that I just made actually are the three subtractive color mixing primary colors actually as well. And so kind of the cool way that this works is the additive color primary colors and the subtractive colors are what we call opposites of one another. And so I don't know how well exactly this is going to show up in my dark room, but I have here a color wheel. Looks like it's showing up okay. And so when I say opposite colors, what I mean are colors that are on the opposite side of the color wheel. And so you can see there's sort of, well, maybe you can see, maybe it comes through on the camera. I can see that I have sort of a really dark, heavy line right here, and right here. So that's yellow, magenta, and cyan. Remember our subtractive primary colors. And the reason those are really heavy and dark is because I printed this out on the printer here at the Science Center. And so the printer cartridges that are in our printer are those colors because they rely on subtractive color mixing because it's using dyes. And so the additive color primary colors are going to be the opposites. So like we can look at cyan and say, what's the opposite of cyan? We just draw a straight line right across and we bump into red. So the pure red and pure cyan are opposites. Similarly, we can go to the yellow and we can draw an opposite side and we get pure blue. Go to the magenta and go to the opposite side and we get pure green, which, like we said, are our additive color mixing primary colors that I was just using right here to make this white light that I was showing you that with. And so it's kind of I guess thinking about like the actual physics of this, the way it works, the way we call it additive color mixing versus subtractive color mixing, is we'll work a little bit with some paint here. So I have here 6 things of paint. One, oh, do I have a phone call to answer here? Do I need one set of paints that are going to represent my subtractive color mixing primary colors, the yellow, the cyan, and the magenta. One set that are going to represent our additive color mixing colors, our red, our blue, and our green. And so we can see this sort of in action here. I'm going to take away my subtractive colors. And I'm going to kind of show how this works, where let's try mixing red and green together. And you'll remember when we mixed red and green together with our light, what we got was yellow. Let's try mixing that together with our paint though. So I'm going to try and get as close as I can. I'm not actually like measuring, but I'm trying to get as close as I can to the same amounts of red and green on my little table, my little plate here. I'll shake this one. And so we know when you mix red light and green light together, you get a yellow light. But do we think that's going to hold true for our paint as well? And so I'm just going to blend that real quick. And it's a little hard to see again because we're in dim light, but I'll tell you, it's not yellow, it's brown. It's definitively brown. Kind of a nice brown though, kind of a charming brown. But that's one. So, like I said, we tried yellow, we got brown. Let's try it with the green and the blue now. So, we know when we mixed green light and blue light, we got cyan light before. Let's see how that works with green and blue. Paint. And trying to get as close to the same amount as I can. I gotta wash my brush out here. I only brought one brush with me, so I gotta make sure I get it nice and clean so I'm not getting red mixed in with my color here. Alright, let's try it again. So we got a dab of blue, a dab of green. And we mix them together and see what we get. So we got cyan before. And this is not brown, at least this time. It's definitely not cyan either. I think we would call this probably teal, is what I'm looking at here. Kind of a teal color. Alright. For completionism's sake, let's try it with red. We're missing, oh yeah, blue. Red and blue. And what we should theoretically get here is magenta for this light. So what we're looking for is this color. Let's see if we get it. I'll tell you, my water that I'm rinsing my brush out in is looking pretty brown as well already. So in just a second here, we'll talk about how this is different and why. Get my last little example one here. We got red and blue that we're mixing together now, and again, definitely not magenta. Almost like black, kinda. Like a really dark purple, maybe. Yeah, I guess it's more of a purple than a black, but it's very dark. But again, not magenta. Not this. And so, like I said, we took the same colors of light and the same colors of paint and mixed them together, and I said, so this should look like this, but instead it's brown. This should look like this. That's probably the closest one, I guess. Should be cyan, but we got teal. And then this should look like this. And again, I guess you could broadly call magenta sort of a purpley, but ours is certainly a lot darker, the one that we made. But we didn't quite hit our marks when we were doing it with the paint, even though we were working with the same colors, or at least as close to the same colors as I could find in our paint collection. Alright. And so, the way this works like this is because the way... It's a difference of when you are mixing light versus mixing like a solid, like, object, basically. And so when we call subtractive color mixing, we call it subtractive color mixing because the way something like paint works is it actually absorbs colors. And so this thing gets hit by white light, it absorbs most of the colors, most of the color spectrum that hits it, and so the stuff that we see is the stuff that gets reflected back. And so it relies on light that gets reflected back at us, and it absorbs certain frequencies of light more efficiently than it does others, and so it sort of distorts the white light that comes back off of it by pulling colors out of it. Subtractive because it's pulling color out is what it's doing. Whereas with light, what it's doing is it's adding colors together. And so I can, subtract colors out of here, but the reason this looks magenta to us isn't because that the plate here is like pulling any colors out of the white light. I'm doing that myself. The reason it looks magenta to us is because the blue light and the red light are getting shined out and they're mixing basically in our eyes. We have certain cells in our eyes called cone cells, and those cone cells are what we use to perceive color. And so the way that they work is we have specific receptors for red, for green, and for blue, which is why we use red, green, and blue as our primary colors, because those are the colors that we have receptors for, humans. Certain animals have more or less or different ones. We talked about Angel the parrot with one of these at one point. Parrots actually have a yellow color receptor too that we don't have, which allows them to see more colors than what we have. Is it yellow? I might be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. But they have a fourth color receptor. And so like parrots can even see like infrared. But anyway, so they get mixed basically in our eyes by how much these cone cells get activated. And so something you can do actually is sort of a fun experiment is if I look at this and I turn it to just red and I just sit here and look at this as just a red thing, like what I'm doing right now is I'm getting red light in my eyes, and I'm getting just red light in my eyes. And our brains and our eyes are pretty smart, and they are able to like look at this and say, hey, this is way more red light than normal. We need to like calibrate this a little bit to like make this kind of appear more normal. And so it'll try and sort of correct and make whatever light you're in sort of even out to being white light. And so the way that your eyes do that is basically by turning the sensitivity down to the relevant cone that's too high. So right now, as I'm sitting here staring at this red light, I'm getting less and less and less and less sensitive to red light. The cones in the red receptors in my eyes, the red cone cells in my eyes are getting less sensitive, and my green and my blue receptors are getting more sensitive, is what's happening as I'm sitting here. And so you can see the effect of this, like anytime you're doing something similar to this, you can even see this if you even necessarily like look at something that is just like of a color. It doesn't even necessarily have to be putting out light. But you can also see this pretty much anytime you're looking at a bright light. And so if you ever do the thing where it's like, oh, I stared at a light bulb and now there's like an afterburn sort of image in my eyes, this is the same effect that's happening. Is, you know, you get a spot in your eye basically where you're less sensitive to the light. And so like I said, right now what I'm doing is I'm putting all this red light in my eyes, and my eyes are saying, this is too much red, we gotta turn the red receptors down, something's wrong here. And so what's gonna happen here is when I turn my green knob and my blue knob all the way back up, I'm gonna be looking at a white light, but it's not gonna look white to me. It's gonna look like the opposite it's gonna look like the opposite of a red light, because even though the red, the yellow, or the red, the green, and the blue are all being shown to me in the same amounts, I'm gonna be less sensitive to the red than I should be. So the white light is gonna end up looking like the opposite of red, which in our case here is cyan. So I'm gonna do that right now. And absolutely, like I said, I have these turned all the way up. Maybe you guys at home were able to do the same thing where you were looking at my red light on the screen here for, you know, that 2 minutes I was talking. And when I turn it up to white, like I said, lo and behold, this definitely doesn't look like white to me. It looks like cyan. So the other thing that's sort of interesting when we're talking about cones, as I mentioned, we have 3 different types of cone cells. We have 3 different types of color receptors. We have the red, the green, and the blue. But we don't have all of them actually in the same amounts. We are actually more easily able to perceive differences in levels of certain colors than others. In particular, humans are really good at perceiving different levels of red. We have more red cones than we do green or blue cones. And so we're really, really easily able to, as I said, perceive differences in different red levels and red light. And so if you ever, you know, you watch like a movie where they're in like a submarine or something, that's why the lights are always red, is because we can actually see in pure red light pretty well at very, very, even if it's a very, very dim light, we can still see pretty well in it because that's the color we're best at perceiving the light levels in. If you ever come to the Science Center and see the Star Lab demo, you'll also notice that the light on our projector is also red for that exact reason. I can have that light be very, very dim, and I can still see pretty well, even though the light is very dim, so I can actually project the stars out and not be disruptive to showing all the stars, while still being able to see all my knobs and switches and whatnot that I need to use on the projector for the Star Lab. And again, that's playing with a piece of just like human eye anatomy there, where we have more red cones than we do green or blue. Also, another example of this manifested. This is why when you turn on the night mode on any of your like computer screen, phone screen, or whatever, it changes it to red. It's because, again, it's easier for us to perceive red, so it's less straining on our eyes. Another kind of nifty thing with that, and this is something that, again, plays with sort of the way that we get taught the way that these colors mix, or like what primary colors are in like elementary school, is again sort of leans into this, where if we talk about it in the context of, like I said, like what we get taught this stuff in school, we learn red, yellow, and blue as our primary colors, right? It's usually what we're taught. And you'll note that like the only one of those colors that's really a subtractive primary color is yellow. And so we can start off with our yellow as our base here. So the magenta becomes the red, which is over here, and then the cyan becomes the blue, which is over here. And so when we're learning like our actual primary colors in school, what we end up with is a color spectrum that's like shifted way over onto the red side of the spectrum. And we consider that to be sort of pretty okay because we're a lot better at perceiving differences in levels of color on that side of the spectrum. You can think about this even like you crack open a box of markers, you know, an 8-pack of markers, and, you know, we have red here, orange here, pink here, yellow here, our green is here, our blue is here, and then probably nothing in this whole like part of the spectrum here. So like when you divvy it up, you know, we have, like I said, an 8-pack of markers. You got 2 of them on this side of the spectrum and 6 of them or 5 of them on this side of the spectrum, which is probably a black in there too. And so again, that's a product of we're really good at perceiving differences in levels of red, and so on the red half of our color wheel there, we're really able to see those different discrepancies. And so like we look over here and like for me, I'm like, okay, blue is this. Like I perceive all of this as blue. You know, I kind of think of this as one big color here basically, and all of this is one big color here basically. Whereas over here I'm like, oh yeah, that's yellow, that's orange, that's red, that's like a pink, that's purple. Again, because they're all dependent on different levels of red, and we're very good at seeing different levels of red. So yeah, and blue is the one that we have the least of. And so what you get, again, when you're doing like the night mode thing, is it's not actually a red. What it does is it filters out the blue light, is what it does, because that's the most straining one, ostensibly, because we have the fewest blue light receptors in our eyes. Okay, let's do one last quick little experiment here. And so, you might have noticed these things that have been laying on top of my color wheel the whole time. Maybe you've observed some changes in them as I've been changing the colors that I've been showing you. And let's sort of orient them like that, sort of in a rainbow, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue. I don't have a purple one. But something that's kind of cool is these are translucent, so they let quite a bit of light through them. But they're also colored, and they're colored with dyes. And so they're colored with subtractive color mixing. But I can really easily manipulate what light they're being subjected to by putting them on the color wheel here. And so we can do something like, we talked about how the way that subtractive color mixing works is by pulling out certain spectrums, basically. It absorbs everything except for the color it wants you to see, basically. And so like for red, this thing really wants me to see red light, and it really only wants me to have red light reflected back at me, so it absorbs everything that's not red light. Well, what would happen if I only subjected it to red light? What would happen to that? So let's bring this one forward. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all the red or all the blue and the green light out, and we're only going to be looking at it as just red light here. And what we're seeing is it doesn't really look red anymore. It looks clear. Like looks like I can just like see straight through it, because it's not absorbing any light. It's reflecting pretty much all the light that's coming at it is getting reflected back at me, and it's not absorbing anything. On the opposite side of the spectrum here, this one here was once blue, and remember it was translucent as well. It was letting some light through, but not all the light through. But now it is like very definitively opaque. Like I can't see through this at all. And that's because, you know, blue is pretty far from the opposite side of the spectrum of our red. And so as such, it doesn't really have any light to reflect back at me. It's just absorbing everything and not reflecting anything back. In a perfect environment, this would just appear black, basically. It still is bluish because we're probably not dealing with a true perfect blue on this, and we're getting some white light coming in from the exhibit floor too. But you can see, you can even just like gauge sort of the relative amounts of red in these dyes by looking at, this. So the ones that look clearish are the ones with a lot of red, and so of course that's our red one, our orange one, and our yellow one. I'm even having a hard time telling which one is which because they're pretty much all just clear as I'm looking at them. And then the ones that have less red got darker, so that's our green and our blue. And we can do the same thing where if we suck all the red and put all the blue in, all of a sudden our blue and our green one, again, get much more clear, and all of a sudden our red, our orange, and our yellow get darker. And do the green one as well. So the green one actually looks really good. It looks very, very clear in the green, and the red one ends up being pretty dark. Nothing quite so stark as the blue one in the red light, but again, this is because the reason that it's not perfect is because we're getting some light pollution in from the exhibit floor, and also, like I said, we're dealing with probably not the purest red that's ever redded out there. And so, I think what I'm going to do now, we're going to highlight a couple other things that we have in this space over here. So I mentioned it's a new exhibit space, so we're talking color stuff. I'm going to take an opportunity to sort of highlight the rest of this space as well while I'm up here, while I got a camera rolling. So I'm going to rotate you around here. And it's going to just be dark. See a light over there. We're going to talk about that in a second too. Let's talk about this space here. This is what I'm really interested in. So what you're looking at is a light that is painted sort of a like creamish color, but has different colors of light projected out onto it. And so the reason we picked the color that we did for this wall is because the base color, the color that's underneath the rainbow that you're seeing here, is actually the sort of average color of the known universe. So you can take in light from all over the universe, take little color samples from all over the place, average it all out, and the average color of our universe, as far as we know it, ends up being sort of this creamish color. And so the idea was we wanted to take that color and then we wanted to project our RGB lights onto it. And you end up with this sort of cool effect where you'll notice as I've been moving around here, moving into the different colors of light, not only do I look different, but my shadow also looks different. So as I'm standing over here in the blue light, you notice my shadow, yellow. And as I move over into the green, it transitions from being yellow, and all of a sudden, you can see it here, kind of standing right in front of it, but it's magenta behind me. And then as I go over into the red, again, it transitions from the magenta-ish to starting to turn into our cyan color over here. I'm going to walk off screen if I go any further. But kind of a cool effect here, where again, we were talking about this in the context of additive and subtractive color mixing, where what I'm doing is I'm blocking part of the spectrum of light from happening behind me. And so shadows, basically, you're just blocking part of the light. And so what you end up with is your shadow basically ends up being the opposite color of whatever light you're being subjected to. And so in this case, when I can change the color of the light I'm subjected to relatively easily, I said I can change the color of my shadow as well. And like I said, it ends up being the opposite, just like we were talking about there before. So as I have my additive primary colors here, my blue, my green, and my red, the colors I'm seeing my shadow being are my subtractive primary colors, my yellow, my magenta, and my cyan. Pretty cool. Same concepts we were just talking about. And then finally, sort of the thing that made us want to make this space in the first place, a fan favorite exhibit, not a new exhibit, but one that has been off the floor for a little while, the Augmented Reality Sandbox, and we'll see how well this one shows up on camera here. Well, this is a neat exhibit that, like I said, it's been on the floor. We've had it for a few years here at the Headwaters Science Center, but we took it off the floor maybe a year ago or so now. And the reason for that was, as you might notice, it's full of sand. And so this is a really cool exhibit where what you can do is move the sand around, and as you do so, it'll sort of update like a topographic map in real time. And so again, you're just seeing colored light, and so what we have here is just white sand. The sand that you're looking at right now in normal light is just white, but you'll notice it's all sorts of different colors because we are projecting colors onto it. And so the way this works is if you happen to walk by here, you'll notice there's stuff hanging above it. And so the black thing that's hanging above it is just an Xbox Connect. And so what it does is it reads the distance of the sand away from itself, and then it assigns that distance a number value, basically. And we send that number value into a computer that's hidden away behind the scenes. That computer takes that number and assigns a color to it, basically. And basically, the closer it goes, the sort of further into the red side of the spectrum you get. So the furthest stuff away from it gets colored blue, and then green, and then yellow, and then orange, and then red, and then eventually white is sort of the top color. Sort of. Because something else that's kind of cool that we can do with this is if you go above your white level a little bit and go a little bit higher, what you'll get is that it'll say, hey, there's something up above our landscape here. Yeah, do something about that. Gotta assign some value to that. And so what it sort of thinks of it as is a cloud. So if you put your hand a little ways above, it'll read it as a cloud, and it'll start raining underneath your hand. I'm getting most of mine sort of on the opposite side of my mountain over here. Maybe I can reach all the way over, get some over there. But what it'll do is it'll start raining, so you start getting water that happens in your sandbox here. And so here, I'm just gonna take my big old pile, and I've got a big lake that's formed over in the corner over here, and I'm just gonna move my mountain onto my lake. And as I move my mountain onto my lake, you'll see my lake kind of quits being a lake. Because that water doesn't want to stay on top of a mountain. It wants to find its way to low points on the map, just like where water does in real life. It starts at areas of high altitude and goes to areas of low altitude. And so what you end up seeing is, when I move a big pile of sand into where the water is, the water, like I said, flows away from it. And so it's kind of a cool thing because you can use it to not only make sort of these fun little topographic maps, but you can also use it to sort of model watersheds as well. And it's up here because we needed it to be away from carpet. It was being tough on our vacuum cleaners, all the sand getting in the carpets and us vacuuming that up. But that's back as well. Like I said, fan favorite exhibit. It's been off the floor for a little while, but it's back and it's working just as well, if not better than it ever did. Because again, now we got it in a nice dark room and those colors are going to show better. So those are sort of the three things we've got up here by the bathroom right now. Those are three exhibits that are all dealing with different lights and colors, basically. I've got some guests that are looking to use the sandbox, so I'm going to let them. But anyway, I think we're going to call that a wrap here. Like I said, we've got some guests that are coming through. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you to the Boys and Girls Club for sponsoring these shows that we're doing on the Saturdays. The Headwaters Science Center is open 9:30 to 5, Monday through Saturday. We're open 1 o'clock to 5 on Sundays, so swing by after lunch on Sundays. Look out for more of these shows in the weekends. We're not doing them for everyone, but sporadically we're back. We haven't been doing the shows for a few months, but we're sort of getting back into the swing of things here on some sort of regular basis. So again, thank you for watching, and